Growing Up Beastie, a tribute to MCA and the Beastie Boys. Every time I tell someone I am a huge Beastie Boys fan, I usually get the same thing. You're kidding, right? And I say with all sincerity that along with Public Enemy, De La Soul, and The Tribe Called Quest, they are one of my favorite hip-hop groups of all time. No kidding. I have been down with group members Ad Rock, Mike D, and MCA since I first heard She's On It on the Crush Groove soundtrack. The year was 1985, long before Eminem became the hottest white rapper. Times were different back then. Hip-hop wasn't even considered music by most and considered a passing fad. Living in the South at the time, rap music was called several things that I won't mention here, but let's just say jungle music was probably the nicest one that I heard. Their musical journey of trying to gain acceptance in a world that was not quite ready to accept them, to learning to strike out on their own, creating their own path, is very similar to my own story. Simply put, I grew up Beastie. The date was November 15th, 1986. And the album that many music critics and fans consider one of the best hip-hop albums was released. Of course, that album is Licensed to Ill. And by the end of 1987, this album had taken over America. However, the effect it had on people was different down racial lines. Some blacks didn't like it because they felt the Beastie Boys were trying to be black and had no street cred, which has also been said about Eminem. Some white people didn't like it because it was hip-hop music. At the time, hip-hop had not even come close to appealing to the mainstream as it is today. Back then, the audience for hip-hop was 80 to 90% black. Once the album began to cross over, the comment I would hear from whites was, "I don't like rap, but I like the Beastie Boys." To me, that does not make any sense, but I understand the sentiment. Because the group is white, it made it easier for them to accept a form of music they had previously viewed with negativity. Although I had very good friends of both races, I mainly listened to the album with my white friends. The vast majority of my black friends just did not want to hear the album. As the album grew in popularity, the less interested I became in it, not because of the quality of the material, but the fact that I was hearing it everywhere. The album had effectively crossed over to both races, and it found itself. Whether or not they were trying to reach a white audience is debatable, but their choice of singles, namely Fight for Your Right and No Sleep Till Brooklyn, seemed to indicate that they were. Both of those songs do not in any way represent the overall sound of the album. These tracks are my least favorite and least listened to songs on that album. With this album, the Beasties, like myself, were trying to find their place in the world. They appealed to each, but never seemed equally welcomed in either world. On July 25th, 1989, was the date that their new album, Paul's Boutique, was released. I was 17 years old and a recent high school grad, and would be starting college in the fall. It had been a long 3 years since I Licensed to Ill. In that time, Run DMC's Raising Hell had taken over the charts and made hip-hop a little more accessible to the masses. Like myself, the Beasties were striking out on their own. I was off to college, and the Beasties were off on their own, as they recently had left their superstar producer, Rick Rubin. However, people were not really interested in what the Beasties were going to do next. At this time, my favorite artist, Prince, was still in the habit of releasing an album every year, so my attention was always with him. There was declining interest in hip-hop during this time. Run DMC's 1988 follow-up to their previous record-breaking album, Tougher Than Leather, was a lackluster follow-up, and the film of the same name was absolutely horrendous. However, when Paul's Boutique was released, my mind was blown. Side note, this was the third CD I ever owned, with the first being Ready for the World, and the second being Prince's Batman soundtrack. Unlike Licensed to Ill, this album was met by negative response from the buying public. Gone was the good time party vibe of its predecessor, while the music on Ill was fairly basic, Boutique is a sample-heavy experience. There are several websites dedicated to the samples on this album, and they probably do not contain them all. The short list of artists sampled are Pink Floyd, Zapp, Johnny Cash, Curtis Mayfield, the Eagles, Joni Mitchell, Alice Cooper, the Beatles, the Commodores, and last but not least, James Brown. Trust me, that list is only the tip of the iceberg. They sampled a great deal of 70s funk, and remember, this was 1989. No one was sampling 70s funk at this time, other than James Brown, of course. The Beasties were not interested in replicating the sound of their previous album. Like Prince's Purple Rain, his follow-up, Around the World in a Day, Boutique is truly a work that does not scream commercial, but rather the work of a group that wants to make the music that moves them. They could have easily have replicated the sound of License to Ill, but they had bigger things in mind. I remember it was like pulling teeth to get people to listen to this album. Some people have moved on to another artist. Some people just didn't like the new sound and direction. I admired their willingness to try a new direction and sound and attempt to try something different from the norm. This trait as a group is one of the things that I've always liked about them. They had an uncanny ability to always be going against the grain. Later, when sampling 70s funk became the norm, I'm sure the attitude was, been there, done that. What took you so long? For years, this record has been my own private secret. I still play it on a regular basis, and it is hands down my favorite album by them. Over the years, it has grown a cult following and is now regarded as yet another hip-hop masterpiece. And I, like the Beasties say, what took you so long? On July 21st, 1992, I was close to completing my third year of college when their third album, Check Your Head, was released. While I found myself comfortable being on my own, I was still trying to find my own way. The Beastie Boys found themselves in a similar situation. Grunge was ruling the charts, and Dr. Dre's The Chronic was still about 8 months away. And forever, the sound of hip-hop music in general would be changed. Although I was still into the music, I had a very limited entertainment budget and wasn't able to buy this when it came out. Not having heard anything from it, my interest was piqued by the cover. As you can see by the cover, they are seated and have instruments with them. Upon my first spin of this album, it was not what I was expecting. The heavy sampling sound of Paul's Boutique is replaced with heavy instrumentation with Ad Rock on guitar, Mike D on drums, MCA on bass. The album still has loads of samples, but this time it is augmented by their playing. Also new to the Beastie Boys repertoire are the instrumental tracks that are featured throughout the album. Traditionally, the hip-hop instrumental was usually reserved for a showcase for the DJ. But here, they are featured as loose jams that don't fit the traditional hip-hop format mold. These became so popular that they spawned two albums, 1996's The End Sound from Way Out and 2007's The Mix-Up. Check Your Head took a while for me to warm up to, but now I feel it is their second best album. Hip-hop had come a long way since 1989, and more people were willing to give it a listen. It does have a grungy sound to it, which was popular at the time, so it was better received than Paul's Boutique, and earned them their first Grammy nomination for Best Rap Performance by a Duo or Group. They found themselves back in regular rotation on MTV, back when they played videos, with What You Want, which is one of their more popular songs that is not on License to Ill. The Beasties had found their way to where they will remain for the rest of their career. On May 23rd, 1994, the group released their fourth album, Ill Communication. It features their now familiar sound of mixing instrumentals, alternative hip-hop, jazz funk, hardcore punk, and rap rock. I had recently graduated from college and was applying all the knowledge and experiences I had learned over the years being fully out into the world. The Beasties were doing the same thing with this album. This was their graduation album. My only criticism of this album is that it is close to the sound of Check Your Head. That is not a bad thing, but this is the first time that the group did not change of display and style. However, of the singles from the album was a monster, Sabotage. It's probably one of their best known songs and was all over the airwaves in 1994. Root Down, which is my favorite song by the group, was also a modest hit but still is in regular rotation on my playlist. The album was met with critical acclaim. Rolling Stone included it on their essential recordings of the 90s, and Spin ranked it number 19 in Spin's list of the 20 best albums of 1994. The Beastie Boys had made it. Later in that year, I would start working at a television station, so in a way, I made it as well. I grew up Beastie. On May 4th, 2012, MCA died from cancer at the age of 47. His voice is irreplaceable. I could not imagine a group moving on without him. No one could. More than likely, they had a plethora of unreleased material that they can release for their fans. The Beastie Boys meant a lot to me growing up, and they still do to this day. I listen to their music on a regular basis, and I'm always reminded how fun and talented they were. They were just kids having fun when they started and morphed into adults who just wanted to have fun. I was with them from the beginning, and I am sad that there will never be any new material from them. No matter what phase hip-hop was in, I could always count on them to come in from left field with a new spin on their classic sound. Think about it for a moment. The Beasties have been in the game since 1985. That's a long time. That is 30 years, and that says a lot for a group that many wrote off after their first album. The group would go on to release 4 more albums, with the final being 2011's Hot Sauce Committee Part 2. Commercially, they were never able to capture the glory of License to Ill. I have strong feelings that they don't care. They will deserve to receive new fans. I hope that they will find as much joy in their music as I have. But my question to the new fans, what took you so long? Thank you, Beasties, for all the great memories, music, and allowing me to grow up with you. Rest in peace, Adam Yauch, aka MCA. I will pour out some brass monkey in your honor. Sean Hill, Hill Street Views.